You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Was that? Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Empowering Process podcast. Thank you so very much for joining me. I have an amazing person. All of my guests are amazing. You know that. But this guy is going to knock your socks off. Scott Schwarz. He is a 30-year veteran of the insurance and financial services industry based in Kansas City and the founder of Never Too Much Money. Now, you would think that that would be boring, but his story is not. Millennial entrepreneurs follow him to gain clarity on their road to maximum wealth because most feel stressed out by debt. We can all relate to that. Confused about what to do with their money and don't trust banks or Wall Street, just like he doesn't. So Scott helps millennial entrepreneurs recycle their money, and he can help you too. You know, he'll take you, not just millennials, and start to supercharge their investments with confidence. Bottom line, Scott shows his clients how to reverse engineer banks and the wealthy to do what they do rather than what they tell you to do. Recycle their money and make banks like a bank. And I love that. Learn how to make bank like a bank. And Scott, welcome. Thank you for sharing your time with me.
Oh, thank you, Gail. It's great to be here. Always great to visit with you.
It's going to be so much fun. So Scott and I have had a few conversations, and we really, bottom line, haha, financial term, talked about forgiveness and letting go of the baggage that we carry and the decisions that we make because of that baggage, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. I know for me, I can tell you about decisions I made at the age of 2 that affected my life, right? Because of it, I'll give you a quick story of what happened at 2 and the decision that I made and the weight that I carried. At 2 years old, I'm sitting playing with clothespins while my mother is at the sink in the kitchen. A pipe burst and the water came pouring out. And my mother, of course, oh my God, 2-year-old Gail thinks I put these things together and took them apart. I created that pipe burst. My actions created okay, this is the connection we make in life that are not true. We make them all the time. This is just a dramatic example, okay? And therefore, I caused my mother to be upset. My decision, I will never do anything to upset my family again.
Wow.
Right, right. And I carried that not to rock the boat attitude throughout my life.
Wow. What a weight to carry for a 2-year-old. I can't even remember being 2 years old.
When a trauma hits your body, first of all memory is
Yeah.
in your DNA, but the trauma is locked in, and sometimes it's difficult to unlock it. But I've done a lot of work on me and in my relationships with anyone that I've had relationships with to understand what's behind my decisions, right?
Yeah.
And so certainly yours didn't start at 2, but your trauma, your choices started at a pretty young age. So share with us, Scott, about the baggage that you carried and your process of letting that go and how that has changed your life.
The main baggage of my life came much later than 2. After I got married, 1 month after the wedding, my then wife sat me down and said, I don't love you, and I never did. And my jaw hits the floor. I'm like, why did you marry me then? And she says, because I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Okay, well, that didn't work. And I kind of went, I wasn't going to give up after 1 month. So I determined, okay, I'm going to be the best husband I can possibly be. And over time, she'll change and we'll have a normal married relationship. That never happened.
No.
The background, and she is now open about telling this. She was abused at a very young age, at 4, and felt that she did not have a voice. She could not express herself. She kept this secret, something that happened for years at such a young, impressionable age, never told her mother, never told anyone. And it was only later, as an adult, and coming to the realization that this is still affecting me, and the effect is amplifying year after year. And it drove a wedge in our relationship. She couldn't really communicate, and so that's the background of it. So over the years that follow, I'm trying to be the best husband I can be and be sensitive, and as long as there was food on the table and a roof overhead, I was getting along okay. Not happy. I felt alone, even though I wasn't alone, because emotionally there was this disconnect there. But then in 2007, I got laid off from a good job. And that was right as the economy was getting bad, the Great Recession. And so I thought, I had a great work record. I thought, no problem, I'll find something else even better quickly. That didn't happen. And so now the food on the table and the roof overhead are not coming easily. And instead, I'm getting foreclosure warnings in the mail, and I'm getting bill collectors' calls on the phone. And I went to the animal hospital where my wife worked to have some income. I was helping in the kennel, which meant I was walking dogs and cleaning out poopy dog cages. So the fall here, I had been in management for a major insurance company, corner office on the 28th floor. And now I am cleaning up dog poop. That was my job. And there was this open lot next to the animal hospital where we would walk the dogs. And now picture this. You're walking one dog after another. Where are your eyes? You're watching your feet. And by the time I was done walking that last dog, I mean, my neck, my upper back, my shoulders would be in pain because I'm, holding my head down to watch my step. And I remember thinking, how ironic is this, that here at a time when I'm hanging my head emotionally and now professionally, now here I'm even hanging my head physically to the point where it's causing pain. I'm a mess, go into a depression, and become an alcoholic. I was self-medicating. And in time, I got another job, another good job, different insurance company. But by this time, the drinking was a thing. It was compulsive. And so even though things were going better, there was that issue still out there that was getting gradually worse. We split, and I mean, we've been divorced for some time now. But now there was resentment because I was blaming my ex for my alcoholism. And one day got the brilliant idea of sneaking a bottle of vodka back in with me to the office as I'm returning from lunch, drank it there at my desk, was discovered and terminated. So now after kind of getting saved financially by getting a good job again, now I've blown that. And really that led to my rock bottom moment. November 3rd, 2015, wrote out my suicide note. It's more like a suicide letter. It was probably 3-4 pages long, addressed to my ex-wife, blaming her for everything. I mean, it was detailed. Here's my mother and my siblings and their phone numbers, my bank, my credit cards, my anyone that might need to be informed of my suicide was on that list with contact information. And my note said basically, this is your fault, so I'm holding you accountable to notify everyone. I felt in that moment that I had an insurance policy, that I felt that money would be better for my then 14-year-old daughter than my presence. That would be the noble thing for me to do, would be, instead of being a drain on her and holding her down, would be for her to have that money. So bought 3 boxes of sleeping pills. My plan was to pull into the garage and close the door with the car running, take all of the 3 boxes of sleeping pills. I did not want to just get sick and just have a hospital bill that I couldn't afford to pay. I wanted to make sure if I was going to do this, that I was going to finish the job. That day, so I call my daughter, because I definitely wanted to have one last conversation with her. So I have a talk with her, tell her I love her, and I'm not letting on to what my plan is. But this, in my mind, was going to be our last conversation. An hour later, she calls me back. Hey, Daddy, can you pick me up from school tomorrow? I need help with my math homework. I say yes, but I don't mean it. I'm not going to be around. 2 hours later, she calls me again. Daddy, can you pick me up from school tomorrow? I need help with my math homework. Yes. Don't mean it. And each time as I disconnect the call, I think to myself, was that from God? My daughter was never, and since has never been so concerned about her math homework, believe me. A third time, probably a couple hours after that, she calls me again. Are you going to come pick me up from school tomorrow? I need help with my math homework. Again, I say yes. Again, I don't mean it. But each time I'm thinking a little bit more, what's going on here? So this plan, pulling into the garage and all that, I was going to do it at 7:30 that night. 7:30 comes. I am standing at the door with my car keys in my hand. My other hand has my insurance policy and the bag with the 3 boxes of sleeping pills in it and a water bottle. And as I'm about to stick the keys, or as I'm about to unlock the door to walk out, my phone vibrates. This time it's a friend of mine. Scott, I see we were supposed to be getting together that evening. Scott, I see you're not here. You weren't here the other day when we were going to be getting together. I just wanted to call and make sure you're all right. Now, I knew that was from God. Guys don't do that. Guys don't call up other guys and say, hey, are you all right? I'm concerned about you. So I'm like, okay, I need to go back inside, lie down for a little while, and just think about this. I do. Almost 2 hours after that, my daughter calls again, a 4th time. Will you come pick me up from school tomorrow? I need help with my math homework. This time I say yes, and I mean it. And the next day I did pick her up from school. And as we're getting our burgers at a fast food joint near her school there, I asked her, so what math homework did you need help with? And she says, oh, I got help from the teacher at school today. I don't need any help. So, all right, now I got some things to figure out. One, what am I going to do? Because I got no job. And I've got bills like crazy, including child support, spousal support. I had been bankrupt. I had been on food stamps. I had been 6.5 months behind on my rent. How I did not get evicted out of that apartment I was in, I've got no idea. So I've got to figure out in a practical way, what am I going to do? I've also got to figure out, okay, so I'm going to be sticking around. I got to figure out why. And I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, with myself. That date, November 3rd, 2015, that was going to be my suicide date, actually turned out to be my sobriety date. I didn't have anything to drink that day. But the reason on that day was so that if an autopsy was done on my body, it would show that I made that last decision sober, that would send some sort of message to my ex that this wasn't an impulsive thing, that I thought through this and made that decision. So that was kind of like reluctantly sober that day, but never did drink again. So I'm at almost 7 years now dry. And of course, that has always been to never go back there. That feeling of emptiness, that feeling of reaching that decision, that feeling of I'll never talk to my daughter again, that feeling that I had on the previous day, that Monday morning when I woke up and was face to face with the fact that I didn't have a job to go to. And now I'm face to face with the fact that, okay, I'm going to survive. I'm going to figure this out, but I have no idea how. And I know I'm pretty unemployable. I've got to figure out how I'm going to earn a living on my own.
But most importantly, Scott, this is so many people get to that suicide point.
Yeah.
And we put our worth on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
We put our value on relationships while we don't value ourselves. Some of the things I wrote down is that you had low self-esteem.
Yep.
You really felt worthless from the marriage and probably before. And that feeling of self-esteem moved into resentment, and that resentment moved into blame,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I know that we're going to talk about forgiveness, right? Because that is really key in clearing that baggage, right? That makes it impossible for us to shine and do our best, right? So you're there and there's like nothing. There's nothing in your life, right? What was it that happened that you decided I need to get my stuff together and here's how I'm going to do it?
Well, just that situation was what made me see, okay, I've got to get my stuff together. I've got to stop blaming. I've got to let go of resentment. I've got to take responsibility. I can't, for years, it was kind of like I've become someone I don't recognize. I've become someone I don't like, but at least it's not my fault. It's her fault. No, I had to take responsibility that I have done this. To have a trigger in that marriage, that's one thing. But I was the one that was pulling the trigger and shooting myself over and over again. I had to stop that. No one else could stop it. And I couldn't blame someone else that, well, you put the trigger within my reach. No, I had to stop that. I did start working for a friend of mine. He was an insurance agent. I knew the insurance world. I was a customer service rep for him. Wasn't very good at it. I'm not a customer service rep kind of guy. But it filled my time and it filled my mind. That's what I needed more than anything else. Didn't work there very long, not even a year, about 10 months. In that time, I also took up learning a new language, learning Spanish. Again, it took time, took my mind. I needed to fill my time and my mind with something positive. That was a part of just keeping, not distracted. It wasn't a distraction. I was truly focused on it. But I needed to replace negative thinking with positive thinking, negative actions with positive actions.
Right. What you were doing, Scott, which is really important to understand, is that you purposefully and with intention made changes in your life.
Yes.
You made changes that were based not on decisions or triggers, but were focused on bringing learning, energy, and positivity in your life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, Gail, it's interesting. One of the things I did in those first few days in that little apartment, I'm like, this place is a mess. I've got to clean this place up. It had become like a microcosm of my life, that it was clutter. It was disorganized. And when I came to realize that it's like, that's what my mind has become. It's become cluttered and disorganized. And even just the act of cleaning my apartment was therapeutic to see organization, was helpful. In those first few days, I filled my time with updating my resume. I needed to, take the practical steps necessary to get back on my feet, one of the things I did, out of financial desperation, I became a human guinea pig, you could say. There's a facility in town there in Kansas City where you sign up for a medical study and they inject you with an unapproved medication. You stay overnight in their facility so they can monitor your reaction. That's a part of the drug company's FDA approval process, gathering that data on human guinea pigs. Why? Because that was the most marketable thing I had to sell, was my health. I needed to do something practical instead of just sitting back and waiting for something positive to happen. I needed to make things happen.
Yeah.
Needed to change my outlook into one of decisive, positive action.
So I'll share another action that I took that people can think about. In the 2007, 2008 time period that you were talking about, I also was out of work. And one of the things that I did was I had a friend, I danced, by the way, a lot. And I had a friend who owned a dance shoe store. And she was like behind in everything. And I went to her and I said, "Can I work for you?" She said, "I can't afford to pay you." I said, "Oh, I don't want to work here permanently. How about I work a couple of hours a day so I get up, get dressed, get out of my house, and do something functional and positive, and then I can get back home and figure out what I'm going to do with my life." That saved me. And that, getting up, your friend gave you the opportunity to get up and get out of the house, right? And mingle with people and do something constructive and positive, right? And that you did something with donating to science, your body, if you will, right? But it's that act of doing something positive to remind yourself that you are worthy, that you do have value, right? And when you start feeling good about yourself, then you can start the forgiveness process.
Yeah, that took a while.
Right.
The divorce was finalized. Process had started before, but it finalized about 2 months after that day, after I got sober. And it was a strange conflict because I was so relieved that it was over, but at the same time so resentful that I was in that position. Now I'm a single parent. So now I've got another situation, and she lived with me after that. Now I've got another situation that could have been a trigger. And I didn't let it be. I stayed dry. But I had more to feel resentment about. And I would tell myself that I forgave her, but then shortly after that realize I didn't really mean it. It took some time before I got to the point where I told myself I forgave her and meant it. And it's interesting when you talk about forgiveness. I had to realize what forgiveness truly is, because so many people confuse it with excusing what someone did to them. What she did was wrong, but I needed to forgive her for my own benefit, for my own relief. Because resentment is like you take poison thinking it's going to kill the other guy.
And I love that analogy because it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a poison that you keep taking and that I had kept taking, even though it was harming me, could have killed me, almost did kill me, thinking that it was lashing out at her. She wasn't even there. I mean, we were already separated by then. So forgiveness is something you do for yourself. It's letting go of that resentment so that you stop punishing yourself over what someone else has done to you. I had to reconcile in my mind, okay, she went through this terribly horrible ordeal. Undeniably, it was awful, it was unjust, it was worse than anything that she had put me through. To imagine being in that position at such a young age. And I had to think through, okay, so how would this affect someone? I mean, that's not something, she tried to sweep it under the rug and just put it out of her mind and forget about it for years and years. Eventually, she did go get professional help, which I had been wanting her to do for a long time. And it's interesting that, you know, I had told her, we're still together at this point, trying to work through things. And I told her, okay, so get to the point where you're feeling you're making progress, and when you think the time is right, and your therapist thinks the time is right, maybe I'll go with you, and then we can start working on us. So one day she's like, okay, I want you to come with me to my appointment. I'm thinking, great. She must feel like she's making progress, and so now we can work on our stuff as a couple. Only to find out after I get there, that was her safe place where she felt comfortable enough to say she was leaving. It wasn't to work on staying together, it was to leave. And by this point, I think our daughter was 12 years old. And I was scared to death of her being the kid from a broken home. So I didn't want that to happen, even though I was unhappy with the marriage. Another, you know, unreconcilable situation in my head. But it helped. I mean, so the therapy had helped her to the point where now she's got a voice. She has made this decision to act on her own. She had never been able to act on her own, independent of her mother first and me later. So fast forwarding now to now I'm sober, now I'm divorced, and now daughter is with her, with her doing better. I kind of reluctantly agreed that, you know, she was acting out. She was having some behavioral issues that she hadn't had before. And so I'm like, okay, maybe it would be better if she was with her mom. Now I'm by myself. And I liked it. And I was surprised by that. I realized I needed it. I needed to work out my issues, including my sobriety, including forgiveness, alone without depending on validation from someone else. And it was time well spent. I needed that. I needed to not depend on someone else for validation.
Scott, you were looking for your own truth. You were looking for your own peace, if you will, right? And your own identity, right? Many of
Yeah.
us don't have a voice because we don't know who we are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And getting there, forgiveness is like the first step. It's not the only step. It is the first most important step.
Yeah. I mean, even years before, I mean, my mother stayed in an unhappy marriage for the sake of the kids.
And look at what you learned.
I was doing the same thing.
Right.
And so having more of a background, there were things that my ex shared with me as far as her therapy sessions, as she's reaching more of an understanding as to why she's feeling the way she feels, why she's acting the way she acts. She's sharing some of that with me, and it helped me to reach an understanding. It helped me eventually, after I stopped drinking, after I realized, hey, I've got to let go of this resentment. Okay, she had her innocence stolen from her unjustly. And wow, to imagine how that would affect someone at such a young age when she doesn't get the help she needs for so long, well into adulthood. And it helped me to think, okay, so I know that in there is a good person. She was struggling with factors way outside her control that changed her. And the innocent person inside is someone that I couldn't blame. If anything, it was the perpetrator all those years ago that was the person to blame.
But even that person, and what I'm hearing you say, Scott, you said earlier, forgiveness is not condoning, right?
Right.
Right. And absolutely. But you did say something which I think is really important for people to hear, that forgiveness is reaching an understanding.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so you can say, this history happened to you, and so you did some things to me because your brains was not wired right. Got it. Sorry that happened. Now I need to heal me. What are some of the things that you did to heal you?
The use of my time, my mental focus, reaffirming a faith that I had lost. I was really struggling, that poison, that resentment, it changed me. It like I said before, I became someone I don't like. I became someone I didn't recognize. And I got back to being me. And that came through re-strengthening my faith.
Yes.
I mentioned earlier how God was the one stepping in to save me.
Right.
He gets the credit, I don't.
Right.
And I had to not just say that, but truly live that, to truly show that appreciation. If someone saves you from drowning, you feel indebted to them, right? You're
Right.
like, hey, what can I do for you? I had to not just say that, I had to live it. And that comes every day. It comes in who you are, me returning to the person I liked, the person I respected, Forgiveness was a big part of that. And I had to forgive myself. I felt so much guilt over becoming this other person, this drunk, because that's something that is wrong. It was wrong according to the values I grew up with. It was wrong according to the values I claimed to stand for so long.
So, and I'll reframe that story. Anything that is self-destructive is wrong.
Yes.
It's not value driven, because values are just a story, quite frankly, Scott, and stories can get changed to suit you. But when it's self-destructive or intentionally harmful to, I say ecologicals, harmful to someone else or to the earth, then it's wrong, because it's an intent. When you hurt yourself, it's intentional. So anything with a negative intention is not healthy. And that's where you need to reevaluate. So so I love the fact that you went to faith. I have very, very many friends who are very successful, who've gone through some incredibly hard times, harsh times in their life, and it is the faith that has pulled them through. Now, faith can be any belief that you have in God, in Jesus, in Allah, in Buddha, in the universe, in a spark of light in the sky. It's knowing that there is something greater than this body, than you, that has created you and loves you and only wants you to have fun. Right? And when you have that belief in something greater, it can be your lifeboat, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah. And to honor that daily. So what are some of the things that you do daily to remind yourself? Because every day I have to remind myself to forgive something, right? Or to say to myself, okay, there's a negative story that you're replaying in your head. It's not up to you to make any of these judgments, and it's up to you to forgive yourself for replaying that story and then forgive the other. So what are some of the things that you do on a regular basis?
Regular basis, I do daily Bible reading every morning, and prayer. Something, and my work also, I mean, it's more than just work for me. It's a form of therapy, because I get to help people, which really, at times, I can kind of see myself, that you mentioned self-esteem problems.
Right.
A lot of times I can see that. I can see the effect that money has on people's self-worth. And that's what I help them with. So it's always wonderful to be able to have that kind of an effect on people who, maybe they didn't fall as hard as I did, but still they feel like there's a weight on them that they can't get off. Or a weight that's holding them down from progressing as far as they would like. Whatever the case is, if I'm able to help them, that's more than just my job. That's a form of therapy for me. So that's something. I'm remarried now, in a wonderful relationship. That of course is very therapeutic for me. So there's a lot. One thing that I read an article, this was probably about a year ago. It was a celebrity who had relapsed. They were an addict. I think it was Demi Lovato, if I remember correctly. It relapsed, almost overdosed, almost died after 5 years of sobriety. And I remember this because I was at about my 5-year
Mhm.
mark. And she was saying in this article how hard it was for her sobriety. Every day it was a struggle. And I remember thinking to myself that, it really hasn't been a big daily struggle for me. It's not something where I'm fighting against temptation day after day after day. And I think a large part of that is because I have filled my mind and my time with positive stuff. You can't be in a vacuum. You can't, and I'm not saying that this is what Demi Lovato does. I have no idea.
No.
And of course, she's in a different, I can only talk about my experience.
Right. Right.
You can't push out the negative without replacing it with something else. You've got to replace it with the positive. Because if you don't, then yeah, you're going to be sitting, wow, I wish I could have a drink. Wow, I wish I could, do this.
So
do
so
that.
here's my experience on addiction. It wasn't alcohol, but I've had addiction issues. When I tried to stop because of other opinions, when I try to stop, think about that. It creates resistance. Resistance is a struggle every day. If there's
Mhm.
resistance, you will fail. It's exhausting. You will fail. The only way that I was able to, like you, overcome and not even think about it anymore is when I realized the root cause. Why am I doing this? Right. And again, it's the forgiveness.
Mhm.
It's the okay. It's letting go of the root cause that allows you to make different choices in your life. Right. And
Yeah.
so, Scott, I'm just amazed that you've made that one major choice, and that's to stay, not to transition. And
Oh,
in
yeah.
the staying as a different person.
Yeah. And I had to change both. I had to change my personality in order to stop the drinking. I had to go back to the person I had been, the good person I had been before, which meant not only changing behavior, but changing thinking, changing outlook, and of course forgiveness.
Right. And changing friends. You change and at least for me, I changed my environment. I didn't do it consciously. It changed because I changed.
Mhm.
I didn't change my environment in order to change. I changed, so therefore my environment changed.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So Scott, I mean, I could go on because there's deeper and more when it comes to the process and the work of forgiveness. I like that you mentioned, just saying that you forgive is not forgiving. Resisting forgiveness because you don't condone it's not forgiveness. And you're right, forgiveness really has an overshadow to it. I work with clients on that all the time. Forgiveness and expectations, letting go of expectations, right? Of others. Expectations of yourself is one thing, but expectations of others. Letting it go because that's where your freedom is. And that's where you find yourself, the real you.
Yeah. So many people misidentify forgiveness as weakness.
Right.
It's just the opposite.
Yes. That's where you find your power. That's where you find your strength. That's where you're no longer hiding behind. I lately the word doormat's been coming up. I've been like posting it and everywhere. No longer allowing yourself to be the doormat, right?
Yeah.
With the like, well, I'm going to give in here because that'll create peace. I'm going to let that happen and you dishonor who you are. When you start honoring who you are, it's easy to forgive because you know who you are,
Yeah.
right?
And that ties it right back again, Gail, to self-worth.
Yes.
You've got to improve yourself. I do a lot of, personal development type reading. That's another thing, going back to a previous question, that's another thing that has
Right.
helped me to change.
Right.
Because if you're still thinking, well, I'm not worthy of happiness, I'm not worthy of success, that's the kind of thinking that led to my wanting to drown my sorrows. And sure, it's not like I never have a negative moment. Of course I do. But when I'm working on my self-worth, that is a huge part of staying positive, of keeping that forgiveness, meaning it. I remember a conversation I had with a friend of mine. Here, okay, so imagine this. I've got all this professional experience in the insurance and financial services world. That's what I know professionally. But at the same time, another dichotomy, my personal finances through all that turmoil were bankruptcy, food stamps, medical experiments, all that. And so I told this friend of mine here, I'm trying to get in the business of helping people with their finances, being viewed as a financial expert. How am I going to do that when I've been bankrupt, when I've been on food stamps and all that? And he said something really interesting in me that helped me to reframe it in my mind. He said, who would someone rather learn from? Some trust fund baby born into wealth who never faced adversity, or someone who had been at the bottom and worked their way up out of it? Wow, big light bulb went off in my mind, because it's not just, I can't stay at rock bottom forever. I climbed out of it, but I have to mentally climb out of it and not view myself as the bankrupt guy, as the food stamps guy. View myself as an overcomer, someone who's come out of that, someone who knows the way, someone who can help people to make that progress.
And you've been very successful at that. So, Scott, our time is just about up. So, if people want to get in touch with you to hear maybe even more of your story, but most importantly, help them with their financial health, both mentally and physically, how to make money work for you, how would they get in touch with you?
Go to nevertoomuchmoney.com. And there you'll be able to contact me directly, schedule a call, look at social media content, videos. That would be the hub to go to, nevertoomuchmoney.com.
Fantastic. And I'll have the link also in the show notes. So everybody, thank you so much for listening to this story. I can so relate. I'm sure some of you can so relate to what it's like to be at the end of your rope and not see that there are other choices to make. Thank goodness that you heard the message, though it was sent to you time and time again. This is Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. If this resonated with you, please let us know. Give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please do comment, and maybe we'll get back together and answer some of your questions. If you know someone who could benefit from this, absolutely share this podcast out with them. Again, Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you, Gail. A pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.